There are no cabinets for them.
No, but
I hit record, so we're recording now.
So,
okay. We're going to filter in and make a panel as we go here.
okay.
But since it is 2 o'clock, we're going to get started with signals intelligence in the 1632 universe. My name is Bjorn Hasseler. I write this series and edit 1632 and beyond. And obviously, there's going to be a lot less signals intelligence going on in 1632 than there is today. For those of you who don't speak acronym or don't want to speak acronym, signals intelligence is all the stuff that's being passed around by radio or TV or telegraph or satellite, any of that stuff that you can listen to, the kind of radar emissions that come off some other country's plane tells you certain things about the characteristic of the set itself. And it can be divided into, you're intercepting their communications, you're using something electronic to learn something about them, and you're studying the characteristics of their stuff.
I apologize, Bjorn, I was talking to David.
No problem. Okay, so you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, for those of you who don't know me, and I think most of you do, my name's Marc Tyrrell. I have a bit of a background in intelligence, but I'd have to shoot you if I told you what it was.
Think it's over.
Yeah. And I write in the 1632 universe, and I'm writing a bunch of spy stuff in it, so let's leave it at that.
So I was just saying how signals intelligence has the listening to their communications, using your electronic ear to gather information, which might overlap, and then looking at the characteristics of their stuff, like, you know, this radar did this to me. And some of that's going to be much more constrained in 1632 than today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree. I mean, we were talking actually in the human intelligence panel about signals intelligence. Let's go with the structure of signals intelligence. You've got somebody who wants to send information that they've gathered, and they want to send it to another group. How are they going to do it? Well, we know in the 1630s they were sending it through letters. We know that it was being intercepted. We know that it was being read, and we know that there were countermeasures involved in it. Once radio comes in, we're going to be seeing exactly the same thing. If we're looking at SigInt running through, let's say, telegraph, because we know a chunk of SigInt or a chunk of information runs through telegraph, it's very easy to intercept telegraph lines. You know, you stick up a little thing and you get all the Morse code running back and forth, and you download it, and then you say, great, we got that.
So sometimes your signal intelligence people are nerds.
Yes.
The Civil War manifestation of this would be the guys who would climb a telegraph pole, cut the line, and holding both ends, put both ends on their tongue, and write the message as it goes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, seriously, it's. I mean, really, all signals intelligence is at a very high structural level is person A wants to communicate with person B. It doesn't matter how they're communicating. SigInt is designed to intercept that communication and either read the communication and then pass it on, or to read the communication, fuck around with it, and then pass on the skirt around version of it. So it's simple, whether it's letters, whether it's telegraphs, whether it's radio, whether it's the internet. And let me give you an interesting public example, which I can actually legally talk about. In Canada, there's a group called the Communications Security Establishment, CSE, which is Canada's Signals Intelligence Agency. And for years and years and years, they had multiple language requirements. It was not only English and French you had to have, which of course if you're in Canada, you have to have both of them. But you had to have at least 2 foreign languages. In 1999, CSE changed their definition of what a foreign language was. They allowed computer languages, okay? Because they were watching the spread of the internet and how the internet was becoming more important than radio, more important than other things. So as of 2001, almost all of their new hires as their, quote, foreign languages had computer languages. Because that would allow them to hack in to internet communications and repurpose them, shall we say. I can tell you right now that the FSB has very similar things, and if you don't know who the FSB are, they're the Russian security inheritors of the KGB. So it's very fluid and very flexible, but again, go back to that structural model. Person A needs to communicate with person B. How are they going to do it? And when we're talking in 1632, this is getting really fascinating because we're changing so rapidly. It's really, I mean, I watched the CSE. I knew the main trainer at the CSE, she's a friend of mine. And watching them trying to deal with the internet and going, well, we don't know how to deal with emails. Really? Yeah, really? Don't know how to deal with emails? Yeah, let me show you how to deal with emails. And watching them and going, you don't understand that people are going to be leaving messages in their draft folders of their email accounts. Not that I would mention David Petraeus getting caught with that, but he's an example of it. And how is it being communicated? It's a fascinating question, and especially when we're in the 1632 universe. How has communications changed?
Right.
Jack, excellent to
Yes.
see you.
I thought I had 20 minutes, but it's 2:09 now, so I have 11 minutes.
Okay.
Then I have to run for my ride.
All right.
Let's see. I guess the one remark I'd like to bring to this, more than anything else, is that anything that transmits a radio signal can be found. One of the sports that young hams tend to learn very early in their radio careers is fox hunting. A fox is a hidden transmitter. Some of them are very cleverly hidden, and pretty much everybody finds it by the end of the event. So once various militaries, various spy factions, anybody else starts using radio, their messages may not be interceptable, depends on how good their crypto is or what language they're speaking, but the transmitter can definitely be found. That has already showed up in one of our mainline novels. A particularly subtle spy has been using, around Best-Sold has been using radio to communicate with various people. And he looks out the window and he sees an uptimer with a direction finder zeroing in on him, and he runs.
Yep. And that,
Good that he knew what it was.
yeah, but you know, that brings us back to the problem. Every media you use for communication has weaknesses. And in the case of radio, this is a good example of a medium. And I know the scenes you're referring to, and he didn't realize that there was a direction finder capability.
So would he be broadcasting in the handbands?
We don't know what frequency he's using, there's nothing said in the novel about that. But since you used the term broadcast, let me define that term. In radio, it means the transmission of information useful to the public, direct to the public, one way. Any other use of radio is not broadcasting, it's something else. And then there's terms for anything you can do with radio. Probably the most common use of radio so far in our universe is Morse code transmission. That's because the equipment is simpler, it makes drastically more efficient use of bandwidth. You can send a message much further, more easily than you can with other means. But tubes are coming, the technology is going to change.
So, I think in 1632, at least right now in the mid-30s, there's, when we say radio, that's covering a bunch of different things.
Yeah, it is. In fact, the USA Navy is using CB to communicate between ships in the fleet. They did that off the Baltic coast. Aircraft radio is also CB because there are about 600 CB rigs at Herder from uptime. They're reliable voice rigs over roughly line of sight plus distances. Without getting into the gory details, if you can shoot a signal at the horizon, it'll be receivable at about 4/3 the distance of the horizon from where you're standing. And of course, from airplanes, the horizon is much, much further away. So it's got a lot of practical uses. It shows up in multiple places in Canon, but it has limitations.
Not the least, the least most important thing for radios, I think, is the power supply. You have to,
Power supply, antenna, what is broadcasting rig? I mean, this is, the man is the expert, but I'm repeating some of the stuff he told me and tried to slam into my head.
Yeah, well, the CB rig is one of the easier things to power with downtime technology.
And there's a infinite power supply that we have an example of at the Military Museum of Fort Worth, the hand crank.
Yeah, that's
They
right.
used to transmit because it took so much more power than receiving, so they didn't use that instead of draining the batteries.
Well, that's more for the power level of a ham rig. A CB rig takes only 5 watts. This is fleet power. Yes.
If you could put that on the bar and share the link for that information on the bar, that would be.
Okay.
Well, that's how radio stations on Australian remote farms and sheep stations were powered in the 1930s. There are pictures of it you can find online, foot pedal operated. To go back to the question I was trying to answer, how do you power a CB rig with downtime technology? You make a 12-volt lead acid storage battery. There's nothing in there that downtimers wouldn't already know. Then you need a means of charging it. Well, that takes a little bit of uptime technology, but by 1633, little generators that can charge a 6-volt or 12-volt battery are already being made. Or you can turn it with a hand crank, you can turn it with a windmill, you can turn it with water power. You figure that they'd be about that big, because you only need about 10 or 15 watts to charge it faster than it's discharging.
Okay. And then when we see the different military units out there communicating by radio and finding that, coming across that Polish radio.
Yeah, let me describe that. This is a Rick Boatwright invention. It's called a Tudacan Morse code transceiver. It's called a Tudacan rig because it's built out of salvaged uptime parts from broken consumer electronics. There might be only one transistor in the thing. And the thing is about this big. It transmits about 1/4 watt of Morse code in one of the ham bands. My own opinion is that if they're using it for short-range military communication on a battlefield, they would like the antenna to be only about this big, so they're probably transmitting in the uppermost of the high-frequency ham bands, or around 30 megahertz or thereabouts. For other purposes, other frequencies are used. CB, by the way, is just a little below that frequency, 26 to 28 megahertz, just below the 10-meter ham band. And then broadcasting, of course, is down in the AM band that we use. And there are two reasons why AM broadcasting is exactly the same downtime as uptime. First off, they've got a large legacy of uptime AM broadcast receivers, so of course they have to use uptime broadcasting frequencies. The other reason that I believe that AM stayed AM even in our time is that a crystal set can receive AM and give you the voice of the music in your ear. It can't by itself demodulate any other form of radio transmission. So yeah, FM or single sideband would work on the AM broadcast band, but the crystal sets wouldn't be able to unscramble it.
This will be a little different, but it's still along the lines of the radios. This will be a little bit of a different question, but it's still along the lines of the radio signal conversation here. You recently saw last fall the Israeli government launch signals blended with supply chain management to detonate, pager units on specified targets. First time I've come across that. Is that a net new use case? Is this something that's happened before?
Yes.
Or do we anticipate seeing it more in the future?
It has happened before if you're talking in our world. It happened with a series of Israeli strikes against the Iranian uranium processing ones where they targeted very specific chips. So the Israeli government is actually very good at that. If we're moving it into 1632, no, we're not going to see that type of stuff.
You won't see that there.
No, because you don't have identifiable targets that can be used for it. Not until probably, what, 1650, 1655?
Well, if
maybe?
you're talking about using the same sort of thing, I think we're talking the 1670s.
Could be.
But setting off explosives by radio, that is a standard technique of industrial blasting.
Mhm.
But to do it safely requires some very sophisticated technology because you do not want it to go off on any stray signal, which happened in World War II when a B-17 was intended to be steered into the sub-pens in France and detonated there. Well, their interlock controls for the radio detonator were very badly designed and it went off over inland and killed the crew. So, in our time, there are ways of encoding a radio signal so that the authentication is very, very secure. Doing that with downtime technology, I think that if somebody is really careful about it, they can do it with electromechanical, not electronic technology derived from their telephone company, AT&L. But if I were asked to do that with electromechanical relay technology, I'd want a 6-month engineering schedule to be sure it was done right. It has to be bulletproof. And the box to control it would probably be about this big. It'd be full of relays and batteries and a radio receiver. But yeah, you could remotely detonate an explosive safely that way. Now, what would be the application? I don't know. If you write the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a great use case that,
Yeah.
is out there.
But before the next one, Jack, did you have to go at a particular point?
I finished with that point.
Okay.
Oh, 2:22. I'm actually late leaving, but I'll answer as I go out the door.
Just got reminded of another method of signal transmission that would be rather difficult to intercept, which was used World War I, even World War II, carrier pigeons.
Oh, yeah, the cannon is full of carrier pigeons. In fact, if you,
The other one is heliographs, and they were being used into the 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
especially the handheld
Well, you
heliograph
can
ones.
see them, you can intercept. Carrier pigeon, you can shoot it down, but that's about the only way to intercept it, and you've got to know where it's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, and
And it'd be close enough you can reach it.
yeah, and carrier pigeons have a nasty tendency to fly way up high because,
Yeah.
well,
but
carrier
they
pigeons.
tend to get lost in hawks and weather.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And of course, there's lots of pigeons.
Bijet. Yeah.
Well, let's just shoot all the pigeons. Really?
Oh, that's a great idea. Let's get rid of the McDonald's birds.
Can we, well, okay, so should we start singing, we did music panel earlier, who's gonna start singing Poisoning Pigeons in the Park?
So if Sunday you're free, why don't you come with me and we'll poison the pigeons in the park? And maybe we'll do in a special we poison the pigeons in the park.
But
Thank you.
really, though, Europe, because of commercial firms, was well supplied with carrier pigeons. You were
Yes.
just going to have to train them to go where you want them, which is not in itself a simple thing to do.
But, Venice actually relied, the Venetian Republic relied on carrier pigeons for their fast message.
Yeah.
And they did have some
The entire French banking system relied on carrier pigeons for
Yeah.
fast messaging.
It occurs to me that the counterintelligence office might like to hire a young lady of the Neder Adel, who has been trained, traditionally as their intercept officer, but she's a falconer.
Oh, that's
Well, I mean,
interesting.
let's get back to the SigInt practices at the time. So pre-Ring of Fire, because this is, I think, crucial because we're dealing with a form of cultural lag, call it, and change in that. The entire idea with intercepting letters, which was the primary form of SigInt at the time, was to make certain that the receiver and the sender didn't know that it had been intercepted. If you get a falconer intercepting the pigeon, they're going to sort of know, oh, wait, why didn't the pigeon show up? And then you're going to have to substitute another pigeon and send it off there and know where it was being sent. And
Then you've got to swipe the pigeon to start with.
Well, okay, so
Yeah.
were pigeons so reliable that you would only send one with an important message?
Yes.
Or would you send multiples?
No, you'd send one usually, because they actually were very reliable. They were very hard to intercept. And this is assuming you're only going 30, 40, 50 miles. If you're going 800 miles, this is a different matter entirely. You might send multiples. But again, do you want to intercept it and let both the sender and the receiver know that you've intercepted it? Or do you want to fake them out? And ideally, what you want to do is fake them out. I mean, look at modern SigInt. The idea is to intercept, copy, decode, decrypt, and understand what people are saying without them knowing that you've done it. And it was very much the same. When we were talking about the human panel, because we got into this, the Countess of Taxis in 1628-29, who was running the Thurn and Taxis postal system, had her own private, black chamber, decrypting letters going back and forth, and then she's selling them off to the highest bidder on the information. And that was, impossible to tell.
Would the receiver always know that it had been intercepted? Because unless it's on a certain schedule, how would you know you're supposed to get one? And how does the receiver know whether or not the message was received or not?
Okay, pre-Ring of Fire, there was a lot of work done on letters because that was the main
Yeah.
medium used. And I was talking in the human thing about a thing called letter locks. So you take a piece of paper like this, and then you cut out an isosceles triangle, and you write in the various areas, and then you fold it up, and you take that triangle and you weave it through, so that, and then seal on top of it, and you got this little packet letter. And if somebody wants to open it, good freaking luck, because you're going to leave indications on it. So the receiver, unless you had a really good person who could open it up and then re-thread it, the receiver would know this has been opened. So it's been done. One of the things
And on pigeons, the way they knew whether they received it was that the person at the other end sent a pigeon back saying, got it.
Okay.
Yep.
So there was a confirmation. Confirmation.
Frequently, yes.
The pigeons go to their roosts, so.
But pigeons are trained
But
between
they're
multiple
trained
roosts.
to go, that's why there were systems of them. You know, here we are, we're in Basel. We have to send a message to Lyon. We're here, this is our roost containing pigeons who grew up in
Semi-portable, not
Lyon.
really portable.
Yeah,
Very dedicated, dedicated lines is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to think in modern terms, it's like you're hardwired between two areas.
And for the museum, we've got several of the portable pigeon carriers that they used in World War I, but it's basically from here to there, not going back.
Exactly, because they weren't trained to come back in
Yeah.
in a strange sort of, oh my God, you might have moved 5 miles.
Yeah, it's from the front to the rear type thing.
Yeah.
I don't know of anyone in the 17th century who was using pigeons except from roost to roost. I don't know of anyone who was carrying them around,
Yeah.
because the pigeons got very confused.
Yeah, I can't think of anything I've run across either.
No, it was really, they were used much more for civilian
Mhm.
than they were for military. You know, there were established
Commercial
routes of
ones,
communication.
It's just as much as any of the governments.
Well, I mean, let's be careful here, because governments don't mean what they mean today. Governments were very, very different at the time, and you could have individual family mercantile houses that were more powerful than the governments they supposedly referred to. The Fuggers are a really good example of this, but you can also look at the Essen crowd. Much more powerful than the governments they supposedly referred to. And the Fuggers had their own private postal system. They had their own communications network. Most of the big merchant families had them because they didn't want governments knowing what they were doing. They didn't want that because the state people, the people who had the supposed power of governance and taxation would go, oh, you made how much? Please, we will take our cut off the top. So it's a very different social structure in a lot of ways. And that's one of the things we haven't really brought out that much in the 1632 universe is a lot of the intelligence operations is sub-state. I mean, look at Nazi. We talk about Nazi and later Miro as running the USE intelligence stuff, but they're both private. They're not state agencies. They're their own networks, which gets us back to who had the state agencies, who were private contractors, who were the rest of them.
And here we have to fall back to some extent. Eric never specified exactly how Nazi or Miro were doing it. As far as he was concerned, that fell into the category of vague as your friend. He just, we have many, many people in the 1632 verse who love the technology of it. Eric preferred to ask somebody, can this be done? But he was writing stories. And as long as he was assured that it could be done, he saw no reason usually to go into the specifics of how it was done unless it affected the story.
If you don't specify, nobody can prove you're wrong.
That's part of it. The other part of it is if you don't specify how it's done, you can get away with incredible stuff.
And also if a new and better system that nobody knew about first around shows up, then you could say, oh, we were thinking of that one.
And before Ring of Fire, a lot of those commercial areas were much more widespread than the principalities of Germany, because there was no Germany until after the Ring of Fire, until Bismarck's time.
Well, we can talk about that if you want to go into history, but even leaving that out, I mean, I'd like to bring out, again in the human panel, we were talking about the establishment of ongoing institutional intelligence organizations, and one of the key ones was in Brussels, and it was all industrial and mercantile intelligence, and that is crucial in a lot of ways, because one of the things that is almost never talked about with intelligence agencies is a very simple question. Who's paying for it? What information do they want? And why do they want it? And why do they think they want it? So you run into this classic problem of intelligence, which is, I want you to tell me what, I don't know, the price of coffee is in Grantville. Why do you want that? Oh, I'm using that as a proxy for the following. Well, is that a valid proxy? We don't know. And you end up with institutions or individuals who say that this piece of information is what we want because we believe it's a proxy for this, but often it isn't. And it shifts out of it.
See an upcoming article by Gorka 5 requested.
Yeah, and that creates problems. The other thing is money. Intelligence operations cost money, large amounts of money. And even in Grantville, they cost a lot of money, if for no other reason than, oh, access to computers costs money, the housing prices are fairly high, the food prices are fairly high, and Grantville is spy central by, what, 32, 33, just because of the de facto internet running around, and there's so many spies there.
Yeah.
And the library.
There's the library.
Libraries.
And then, yes, the libraries, and there are 3 other forms of communications here. We've been talking mostly about two-way radio on the ham bands and a little bit on the AM band, but there's commercial radio and television. And I think for our purposes here today, they can be grouped together, that there's an opportunity for other powers to have people doing electronic intelligence gathering by listening to the radio and watching TV.
Yep.
I'll go a little bit further and say, even if that's choice of programming, not just the day's news.
I'd add in one other additional point. First off, we still have a truncated, almost boulderized version of the internet.
Oh, yes.
And that allows for collaboration, because so many of the intelligence operations were actually independent contractors. So, you know, oh, you're looking for that? I can give you information on that. Can you give me information on it? You can? Great. Wonderful. Love it. Let's
There's an internet in Grantville.
Yeah.
It is slow. There's probably an old 8086 holding the thing together. Maybe a 286. Your cutting edge machines are Pentium 2s. There might have been a Pentium 1 if somebody sprung for it like the week it came out. Probably not, or Pentium 3 the week it came out, but probably not. But still, compared to what they're used to downtown, and with radio and telegraph, we need to specify a little bit. There are these things that we call telegrams going back and forth. And it is possible that some of those telegrams spend some of their transmission life going over the wires and another part of their transmission life going through the air as we reach the end of the wire and two-way radio stations pick them up.
Yep.
And then at their target location, they're converted back into the traditional telegraph form.
And once they're converted back, that gives you the opportunity to place people inside saying,
Right.
okay, what was received for this person? Okay, we'll just copy that down. So intercepts that way.
Yeah, one thing that I have written about is Saxony suspecting correctly that they are not going to do MASH in the USE, man for man on the battlefield, has thrown a certain amount of their resources into intelligence and just basically screwing with what the USE is up to. And along the Thuringian-Franconian border, they have managed to insert a dude into the group of people who are just taking down these radio messages that come in, and instead of the correct form being filed, it's altering the orders slightly specifically to move patrols out of his way on one particular day so that he can do something, or his boss can do something, really. You can do that sort of thing. You can also learn a fair amount about Grantville and how uptimers think and operate just by absorbing the broadcast material.
Well, I did a lot of work on observing broadcast material when I was analyzing ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you're exactly right. If you get somebody with the right mindset, you can learn an incredible amount. And the fact that it's broadcast gives you a huge advantage because you will not be seen. You could have an analyst with a crystal radio sitting 60 miles away from Grantville, listening to every program, writing it down, and if they had the right mindset for pattern recognition, they could actually pull it out and go, okay, this is how it's running, and ideally you can actually identify certain centers of gravity in that, which is quite possible.
Well, really, they should, for many purposes, have them reading the little neighborhood gossip columns in the
Absolutely.
newspapers, because they will have a good idea, so-and-so came to the ladies' aid. It's too bad her husband is.
Yeah. I mean, when I was working on Al-Qaeda and ISIS, all we had was the monthly publications, which we knew were propaganda and BS, but yeah, exactly. Grantville is so open. You can get that. You can get the daily newspapers coming in. You can make the correlations. You can do it.
This is Men in Black going to the newsstand and picking up all the news rags?
No. The Men in Black are actually adding to them.
Yes.
Well, something that's true.
That is actually where the National Inquisitor comes from.
Yes.
As far as disseminating information, though, I really love the scene, I don't remember where it is offhand, where Nasi is considering, this would be so much more efficient if I could make a packet for each one of them of what I want them to take home, and just hand it to them. But no, they wouldn't believe me, so I need to let them blunder through the library in their own time.
Actually, my favorite story on misinformation, disinformation involving radio was Snow White and the RR. Because that was, I don't know if you guys have read it, or that was one of his.
What's it in?
It's in the Granville Gazette,
Okay.
somewhere in the 50s, I think.
Oh gosh, I'd have to look it up, it's been a while.
But it was a case of Jacob von Bain has been producing an amazing time travel story set up, and a bunch of people in a number of regiments are starting to read this and they really like it, but it's only the first issue. So they really want to get the second issue. But in order to get the second issue, how are they going to do it? Because, you know, it's in Halberstadt, I believe, it's
Yes.
being published. And, you know, they're just about ready to invade Saxony, so they're not going to be able to get it in time, so they end up negotiating for advanced reader copies coming in. But in order to get advanced reader copies coming in, they're not going to be sent physically, they're going to be sent by radio. So you take a bunch of the radio trainees who are doing all sorts of weird practice things and get them to send the stories. Well, the Saxons who are listening to the radio here are going, what? The skyships are coming in, and they're using light weapons attacking here. And the way he ended it was just hilarious. Right after the Battle of Zvenko, and you've got this captured captain going, I'd like to join your skyship organization.
Okay.
That all depended on Saxony did swipe one of the radios at one of the stations along the railroad. So I will get around to publishing that story at some point.
Well, you know, I mean, it's inevitable, you know, that other people will use radio besides, you know, besides the uptimers. I
Yep.
mean,
It's
it's not just, I mean, it's not just a matter of security, it's a matter of policy that we want to share technology so it will be expanded.
Well, we already know in canon that the Spanish have it.
Yeah.
The Spanish intel agencies have it, because if you look at the last of the papal ones, you've got, why am I blanking on his name? The chief Spanish spy.
Pedro Dolor.
Pedro Dolor, yeah. Radio to the archives, the intelligence archives, to get information on particular uptimers, specifically Sharon Nichols.
Yeah.
So you've already got this set up. You had a Spanish agent in 1634 in Besançon who had his own radio and was in communication, who's then sent into communication with, you know, Cardinal Borgia. So radio is being adopted by a number of the intel agencies, but they are unaware of a number of things. So the fox chase game that Jack was talking about, that ends up biting Delore in the butt. And it's a case of, they'll remember it in the future, but how does it work?
And then on the internet, somebody had a copy of Pretty Good Protection.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been converted into, well, I guess within it, there's a spy bulletin board.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the membership, you can post presumably under your handle rather than your name. And there's no reason that they can't trade information back and forth on the internet. And it's this is actually suggested to I forget. It's one of the Russians talking to Brady's prince talking to Nazi, and the guy says we can't be seen in public together, or else the flow of information would dry up, and that would be inconvenient for you and disastrous for me. So he puts him on this program, and we have very little other information about that. This is a field that is just ripe for stories. who else is on there? You know, is one of them the 15-year-old freshman in high school who always wanted to play around with this stuff? Is somebody else really not who they seem?
Yeah, how did they Len was supposed to love the internet. How did they pry him out of there?
Yeah.
We sent him off to Prague and then on farther. How did you get him out of there?
Yep.
Because it's not really the internet anymore.
Yeah, I know.
And now he's got a chance to go to Prague again, well,
Yeah,
sort of.
Yeah.
And there's
And large amounts of money.
There's one more radio network that we haven't mentioned. At the end of the Vatican sanction, all the clergy that are attending the Ascension Colloquy are given a radio. And the idea is that they will make periodic checks on a schedule, and if somebody misses their check-in, they've probably been taken out. So this is something of a security measure for them as well. But this is a time period where many of these guys who were opposed to each other would write books against each other. And you have to wait for your opponent to write the book, and then you think over his arguments, and then you write your response, which is not fast. And now you can talk to him on the radio. And I'm really curious as to what that does to theological debate in Europe. Could go either way. And what other information these clergy members start sending back and forth. And whether other people cotton onto the fact that this network is there.
I mean, my initial response to that is, what are the rulers going to do? And are they going to develop SigInt capabilities so they can keep track of these clergy? And what are they actually talking about? What ideas are they bringing out? Do we need to take them out? Are they getting too uppity? And it's an interesting take on that, because at the time, the clergy were pretty much controlled by the rulers one way or another. Let's take the papacy, where the clergy were the rulers. But he's really gone, right? It's, you don't like the way your clergy are going, you convert, get rid of them. So what are the rulers going to do? Are they going to be forced into developing SigInt capabilities as a result of this? Are they going to be forced to divert funds so that they can have enough people to monitor what is going on?
At some point, somebody's going to have to make a hard choice between, do I pick up those SRG clones, or is it more important that I have SigInt?
Yes.
Because some regimes have got to be struck. Denmark, for instance, has been spending money like water, and it perhaps exceeds their income stream, just a bit, by which I mean a lot. Okay, questions? Comments?
Ideas? Anybody got ideas for stories coming out on this?
That's the next one.
Well, you say it's very simple to tap into telegraph communication.
Yes, it is.
But didn't we establish right at the beginning that we're taking resistance readings along the way along our line? So can we tell whether somebody's tapping?
Not easily.
It depends on how long the line is. The longer it is, the harder it's going to be, and how many of the ohmmeters, resistance meters are available, and how many folks know how to use them.
And if you're looking at the telegraph going from, say, Grantville to Halle, that's what, 50 miles, 60 miles, something like that?
That's not all wired.
That's all wired,
No.
isn't it?
Once you get to Canberra, you're back on radio.
No, I'm talking from Grantville to Halle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Combear.
Isn't that all?
Not Hamburg, Hamburg.
Oh, Canva.
It's a ditzy little town
Yeah.
in the middle.
Yeah, and the wire may only go to Jena, but it does not extend north from Koppenberg. The Naumburg, Wissenfels, and Merseburg and Skopau stations are all radio only.
And also, for story purposes, we have to remember to factor in, not only is it technically possible for this to be done, but is the potential money man willing to spend money on this particular initiative? I deliberately made Frederick of Denmark in Westfalen something of a technophobe. And he's 2 years in when his younger half-brother comes along and says, I respect you, Frederick, I like you, I am going to drag you kicking and screaming and objecting every step of the way into what is now the modern world. And that was, I have to admit, to some extent, modeled upon my late husband, who had in his office in Washington, D.C., an assistant whose sole purpose was to stand behind his shoulder when he used a computer to, make sure that nothing really unfortunate happened in the course of the day. But he had an attendant assigned to him because, he did not even have his own email address. Anything that he did from the house, he came to me and I sent it out on my computer.
Well,
And there are going to be people like this
Yes.
downtown.
Yes,
there
there
are
will.
going to be a lot of people like that downtown, much more than we have right now, because, when you look at computerization and people's reactions to computerization right now, we've been computerizing since World War II. And that's a fair amount of time. On the personal level, you started getting PCs late 70s, early 80s.
I bought my first PC piggybacking on a Navy bid in '82.
Yeah, I got my first one in '85, but I had a couple of friends who got theirs in the late '70s. But, we're early adopters, totally early adopters. I've got friends who didn't get PCs or the equivalent until 2005, 2010. And they can't use them.
But really, the only way you could afford one in '82 for an average person was to if you had some kind of a connection which would allow you to piggyback on a government bid, because I was able to get it for $2,800.
That's the area we started looking into things like Commodore 64s. That's when
But
they started
again, this
coming
gets
in.
into money, because, is this going to be an investment that is deemed worthwhile by the money person?
Sure. I paid
It's-
$6,000 for my
yeah.
first one.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we gotta leave a 5-minute break before Snurker's here
Yeah.
to reset.
If for no other reason than I need a cigarette.